Liz, I'll start with you here on set. Firing and then unfiring nuclear agency employees raises major questions about nuclear security, and then also just the way that the DOJ team is going about this.
Yeah, I spoke earlier today with a source who confirmed a lot of what the Associated Press and other news outlets had been reporting recently, which was that last week, as you said, a number of these employees at the National Nuclear Security Administration, a little-known agency, probably many of us even in Washington had never heard of this. It's within the Department of Energy, but semi-autonomous. A bunch of these people, like more than 180 or so people, were given these notices that they were going to be terminated and then brought back on Friday. So I spoke with Daryl Kimball, who works at the Arms Control Association earlier today, and he was just sort of explaining why this is a problem when people who are overseeing the maintenance of the nuclear stockpile in this country are let go and then brought back, the kind of confusion that creates. This is a very specialized kind of workforce as well. Scientists, engineers, people that have a lot of training to deal with our nuclear facilities. That becoming a large part of this overall DOJ conversation about national security implications of DOJ going into these various agencies, making changes, and also accessing, in some cases, sensitive information.
Well, yeah, there's the sensitive data piece of this.
Yeah.
I've heard concerns from sources and lawmakers about just the general brain drain from within the government. And you see it exactly in this instance that you're talking about here, Liz. Susan, Republicans have been mostly silent when it comes to DOJ actions. So do you expect any reaction to a DOJ-affiliated IRS employee, something that Liz was just teasing on right there, apparently trying to access taxpayer information, again, as everyone's starting to file their taxes?
Do I expect Republicans to fight back? No. As a matter of fact, I think they like the fact that there is that the office of the president is the one making these really broad-based decisions to reduce the workforce and cut spending, and they don't have to take a vote on it. When this comes back to their districts, though, when people start saying to their elected officials, oh, this program is cut, or the hospital can no longer serve X amount of constituencies because the funding is gone for doctors, that is where the rubber hits the road. And we've heard bubblings from certain Republican senators, but not enough to really make a difference. Let's not forget, these are not surgical cuts. These are, Musk going in there and Trump going in there with a machete. Consequences be damned. But in fact, they are dangerous and they are irresponsible.
Well, Basil, Susan teased it up well, because this morning on Morning Joe, David Ignatius described some of these cuts as ready, fire, aim. It felt apt. So what is your reaction that you're hearing to some of these cuts, especially in departments like the CDC amid an avian flu outbreak, no less?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And over the weekend, there was an announcement about hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts to education contracts. By the way, these are contracts where educators have the opportunity to see if the curriculum in a school is actually doing what it's supposed to do to teach kids. All of these things, this broad brush, this sledgehammer to government workers and to government services is doing exactly what you mentioned before: the brain drain, the loss of decades of institutional power and memory and history. And to Susan's earlier point, yes, the members of the Senate, Republican members of the Senate and the House, can sort of step back and say, this wasn't us, this was them. But what Democrats, I believe, are going to do and have been already doing is being able to detail district by district how these cuts are affecting everyday Americans. And we've already seen some polling that independent voters and moderate voters are reacting quite negatively to what Elon Musk is doing, and the fact that they didn't vote for this exactly. They may have voted for maybe shrinking government, but they didn't vote for what could be widespread unemployment increases and challenges with, sort of related businesses losing money because of the suddenness and capriciousness of these acts.
Maybe not. And yet there are some Republican voters, I imagine, who are out there saying, this is exactly what I voted for. This is what draining the swamp, to carry the phrase, looks like. But one of the first places, Liz, that actually felt the sledgehammer was USAID. Yeah. And you're still tracking the fallout there amid all of the other that we're following.
Yeah, USAID was one of the first agencies that Elon Musk went into, and they shut off access to that building. And then we've been following these court cases in the last few weeks since. I spoke on Friday with a American who is based at an NGO in East Africa, and basically just describing to me what it is like to be on the ground there, trying to do humanitarian work in various parts of the world. This person in East Africa working on PEPFAR and HIV/AIDS education programs for young people, and how basically their NGO has been rendered inoperable right now because they received a huge majority of their funding from USAID, and the conversations that Americans who work for nonprofits are having on the ground with people explaining they want to continue to do this kind of work, especially with something like PEPFAR and some of the humanitarian and medicinal programs that the United States has provided. This person saying that he's saying, yes, I want to continue providing this service, but right now this is all on hold. Their communications with USAID, this NGO, those are still paused right now. So that agency being in limbo, and we're still waiting for the federal judge to make a decision. We're expecting that on Friday of this week. But with USAID in limbo, many of the programs that rely on the funding, they're also in limbo.